But everyone get comfortable. Gamar Chatzima Tova. You have nowhere to go, okay? I got you. I got you. On live stream too, I got you. I want to talk this Yom Kippur day. It may be a bit heavy at times, but hopefully a little levity too. About one of the greatest rabbis that have influence on American Judaism, and certainly on me and Rabbi Jenny, who died just a few months ago. And that's Rabbi Harold Kushner, Zatzal. May his memory be for a blessing. His cardinal book, he wrote many books, but his famous book in 1981 was When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Remember, it's not called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People. It's When, because he says, and we all know, it's just a matter of time. It's happening to all of us. And his book was an international bestseller because it spoke so profoundly to the human condition and rooted beautifully and powerfully in the Torah and Jewish values. And I feel on this Yom Kippur with Yizkor, we need to bring Harold Kushner, alav shalom, may rest in peace. And for those of you who are very familiar, let this be a little bit of a review, but hopefully like maybe a new angle on it. And for those who are not, I hope you are reacquainted or acquainted for the first time with one of the greatest teachers, not only about Judaism and God, but really about suffering, about what it means to be a person who suffers and strives with all of his might to find a response. You know, the way I want to share this story is through something that happened this year, which really, it broke my heart. And when I share this story to you, it's going to be about a different faith tradition. And as I share it to you, I imagine, if I do this right, you're going to recognize that I was pretty uncomfortable with some of the theological, religious stuff going on in this moment. But I want you to know I'm sharing this story not to do a disputation or, we Jews believe this and, this group believes that and we're right and they're wrong. Far, far from it. The reason I'm sharing it is because it was so different than my experience, so different than I would gather most American Jews, and certainly Beth Meyer, Nix, who I've spoken to and worked with, and so is Rabbi Jenny, over these 19 years. When you go through suffering, this is not the typical Jewish response. But I think it's important to bring forward because it is a response to suffering. And it happened on Newton Road. About 5-6 months ago, the 50-year-old pastor at the large church with the steeple down the street died. 50 years old. 5 children. From about 9 or 10 years old to about 22 years old. Charlie Culligan, may rest in peace. I feel really privileged that we're bringing him to mind here at our shul. And many of us, we watched that church being built down the road. There have been 3 pastors. See, you've had us for 19 years, been stuck with us. 3, all right, at that church. And that church is Baptist. Some of you know their denomination, we'll just say it's pretty conservative, okay? But the pastors and leadership there, even though theologically, right, if you push them, they're not exactly seeing us as full believers. But the pastors, to a person, always sat down with me, have had lunch with me, have been great, I would consider colleagues and even friends. And we share parking lots as we do on Yom Kippur, and they do on their big holidays with us. And there's a great camaraderie, I would say genuine love your neighbor as yourself spirit. So while we disagree on about God, that's pretty clear, we have found a way to love each other through it. And the most person I felt that way was with Charlie Culligan. About a year and a half ago, Charlie finally, he just arrived. A little background on Charlie. Charlie was born in the South, in this kind of near, I think North Carolina, Georgia, North Carolina area. I can't remember exactly where it was, but somewhere in the Southeast. But he served his first church in Corpus Christi, Texas, right, like near the border. And he was a very successful pastor, and he loved it there. He was very happy at this place, and his kids loved it. But he said, as he described to me at lunch together at Winston's Grill, okay, that he felt called. He was also called by their search committee, but he felt called, all right? And he came to this church down here to serve. And it was, for him, it was the big city. I mean, a real big city, right? And it was a much larger congregation with professors from Southeastern Seminary, for those that are familiar, Wake Forest, which is a Macher seminary just right up the road here. Many of them attend and are leaders in the church over there. It's a high-powered church in the Raleigh city, we'll say in our area. And he said, am I up for it? In fact, at lunch, he told me this funny joke. I mean, I've kind of used it since. He said, Rabbi, I can't do the accent. Rabbi, they say the A students in seminary, they become professors. The B students in the seminary, they become writers of great books. The C students, pastors like us. That's what he says. I said, hey, I wasn't bad. I was a C student. Okay, whatever. Okay? It's not yeshiva. This was seminary, all right? Different, not yeshiva. But he said that because he was very self-effacing. He was totally fine with making fun of himself and like making light. It wasn't about him. And we talked about the challenges, believe it or not, of being clergy, what it's like to be a pastor, lead a new congregation. I, of course, remembered it was exactly like 18 years before. And we talked shop, as you do at lunch. And he told me how the job really weighed on him enormously. Now, many of you know, especially those in our congregation who are familiar with Christianity or even grew up Christian, know that when I tell my colleagues, I say, that we got the World Series coming up, Rosh and Kippur, I say it's like Christmas and Easter within 10 days. That's what I say, all right? But from our Christian colleagues, Christmas, Easter, those are the big, that's their World Series, clergy-wise, okay? It's big time. It was a few days before Easter, and Charlie was feeling tremendous pressure about his sermon and the congregation and things going on, and he had a stroke. And right before Easter, or right around the Easter day, he actually died at 50 years old. Now, some of that were for reasons we don't know. Some of them were probably medical reasons we don't understand. But some of it was definitely the stress of the position, something that, we are in a club that only clergy and maybe clergy and presidents of shuls understand, all right? It's a certain club. Doesn't matter what denomination or religious flavor you are. We all feel this. So, of course, I was contacted, because over the years, we've developed relationships with the church, not just the pastors, but the lay people. We have some lay people come over and do things together. It's been beautiful. So they invited me to come, and I had an honored seat. I was definitely the only rabbi, and probably the only Jew in this funeral that took place there. And, it was incredibly moving. It's a 50-year-old man. All of his children are on the pulpit speaking of him. His wife, my admiration for her is endless. Her ability to accept a receiving line of, seriously, 1,000 people coming to offer each one. As she stood there, was able to, I wanted to pull her away. How can you do this? Your husband just died. You're going to be comforting others, saying, but she felt she was a person of service. She wanted to be there for her community. It was inspiring. But then there were the sermons, on the pulpit. And again, I'm not sharing this here to say we know better. Truly, it's from the bottom of my heart. When you're going through suffering, real suffering, whatever gets you through, if your belief is different than mine, one's not right and one's not wrong. But I do want to present it here, what was basically being said, because the truth is some of the things being said in that pulpit, in that funeral, are in the Jewish tradition. Remember, where did they get it from, guys? Okay, a lot of it? Us. Okay, so let's be clear. To a person, they said, God is in charge. God is in charge. We know this happened for a reason. Lines like, God called him early. God must have needed him up there. Also in the service, some of you are familiar, there was like a call to faith and encouragement for people to be inspired to love God more and feel saved in this moment by being inspired by what Charlie gave. Ultimately, they would say, his life. Now, again, I'm sitting there, and I am, with all respect and love, I'm in tears because I'm seeing this, I'm experiencing this as a rabbi, a clergy person, as a kind of friend, a colleague. I'm 51, he's 50. I identify with him in so many different ways. He was so gregarious and kind. In fact, another story I told for that lunch, I wasn't going to say it, but I'm like, the heck, let's go for it. You might remember a couple years ago, before he arrived, Vice President Pence spoke at that church. Some of you may not know. If you don't, now you know. Vice President Pence was not invited by the congregation. It was a rental. A rental. We have similar distinctions here in other shuls. It's not the formal synagogue. They're just renting the space. But Charlie and I knew better. So I said, Charlie, a couple years ago at your church, Vice President Pence was here. He goes, yeah, I heard about that. He's like, Rabbi, I'm not really into politics. I wouldn't have been my decision. I said, but the truth, Rabbi, it was a rental. It was not I said, I understand. He said, I had a lot of congregants there, but it was a rental. I said, good. You had a lot of congregants in attendance. I had a lot of congregants in Newton Road protesting. We can get together, fine. By the way, I include some of my own family, but I didn't tell him that part, right? But he laughed at that. Like, he appreciated that humor. At the funeral, the interim, what the number 2 pastor told me, that after I told that story, which was just as a joke, basically, like just to be funny, he came back to the office and told his board of trustees, we will never invite a politician again to our church, even as a rental. Why? I do not want to upset our brothers and sisters up the road at Beth Meyer Synagogue. I never requested that of him. I didn't say that. I meant it truly is a joke. But he took it deadly seriously because he understood love your neighbor as yourself. See, that's what this church is about. That's why I can respect. We may disagree on a lot, but on this we can agree to love each other. That's, thankfully, the message I think of the only way our country is going to succeed is through messages like that. But let's come back. Because in the book of Deuteronomy, guys, just flip it open. Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the 5th book. It says over and over again, as Moses is so nervous we're going to the promised land, worried we're going to, he knows he's not going to make it there with us, so he's very worried. He says, look, you're going to do things wrong. So that God and Moshe are throwing on the Jewish guilt trip left and right, saying, if you don't do the mitzvot, guess what? Chop liver, and if you do them, things will be good for you. And they make a big sign of it on the Jordan River as we go over, how it's going to be, how you should do this. A lot of warnings. Basically, Deuteronomy says over and over, if you do good things, if you're a righteous person, if you're a mensch, if you do good stuff, God will reward you. And if you do bad stuff, the exact opposite. And that's what they said in the pulpit, essentially, at this funeral. Also speaking about this next world. I know we tend to say, even I say, we don't really have heaven and hell and the same. It's not really totally true, guys. I sold you a bill of goods a little bit. If you look at the Talmud, we have something called Olam Haba. There is this idea of the next world. Are we very specific? Do we know what it's like? No. Is it the focus of our religion? No. But it's in there. It's in there. Christianity just took what was maybe on the margins and put it in the middle, but we share that. It's a matter of focus. We focus on this world, but we don't deny there's something. But at this service, the idea was, in fact, there was a feeling in the service of don't even cry, because crying would mean you were sad and he's reunited with his maker. Again, I respect it. Again, it's actually parts are in our tradition. But there's some big problems with it. And here's what I'm going to put out as the problems that I think many of you here sitting in Beth Meyer Synagogue have. And this is what Harold Kushner talked about. And there are really 3. The first is, of course, as Jews, we don't accept Christian views in the same way. So put aside that it feels Christian, that's not our style, our way, or the focus of religion. Fine. But here's where the rubber really hits the road, guys. And it was said by Rabbi Yitz Greenberg, who is still living in his 90s, an unbelievably important thinker for those who are familiar with him. He once said, this has been decades ago, but it still rings through my heart and my soul, and I imagine yours as well. He says, after the Holocaust, anybody I don't care who you are. If you say something about God, when you say God, and you say something, you postulate God does this, or reunited with God, or God, whatever God talk you say, if you have the guts to say God, you should be willing to say that same statement in front of the 1.5 million burning children. You believe that the good people will live long and the bad people won't? Would you say that to the babies who were murdered in the Shoah? If you can't, that's what he says. And I would dare to say most Jews in the world, but certainly American Jews and certainly Jews here at Beth Meyer, we're sitting here thinking, can I really say that there's a reason why people die tragically? It's because when it comes to babies who haven't had a chance to live, can we really say that there's a reason? Or is it better that they're reunited, we shouldn't cry? Yitz Greenberg's idea pervades the Jewish people today. A lot of great consternation and struggle with God, because how do we explain the ultimate tragedy? Now check out the flip side, though. There's also another side to this. And this is where I think American culture and American Jewish community kind of have its own unique mishigas. But it's a good mishigas, but it's a mishigas, okay? Because America is built so strongly on the idea of rugged individualism. Pull yourself up from your bootstraps. That each person should do everything in their power to control their destiny, economic, whatever it may be, professional, family, relation. You do your own, on your own. That is the strength. I remember when I was a kid, the only magazine I read was Sports Illustrated, and there was this great advertisement. Sorry, Dr. Mandy Cohen, the doctors here. It was great. It was the Marlboro Man. Remember the Marlboro Man? Who remembers the Marlboro Man? No, Marlboro Man? He's like smoking a cigarette, okay? You know? I think about it every time I go up to Richmond and pass by, the Marlboro Man place. And he's on a horse, and it's like a little bit of snow, and all there is like buffalo around somewhere in the west, and there's nobody around. And the picture is, he's the great American male. Alone, strong, doesn't need anybody, literally probably has bootstraps on, all right? But this idea, which has been so successful to the American project, it has lifted. Immigrants have come to this country saying, including my grandparents, the reason I want to be here is because I want the chance to fulfill my individual destiny. I don't want to be held back, or I don't need to be helped by anyone else. I want to do it on my own. But the problem with that in extreme, if we've learned anything from COVID, is that individualism, this isolationism, it makes us lonely and sad and depressed and lacking a lot of other structures that make us healthy. But when it comes to God, it says, I don't need God. Because if I need God, then God is a crutch. I remember when I was 19, 20 years old in college, came back for Rosh Hashanah just like this in Maryland. And my father, many of you know, was a cantor, served as a cantor at our congregation. And I remember during the service I grew up with, the silent Amidah was a little bit different. There was a special place we do silent meditation. And I remember on Rosh Hashanah that year, I was like 19, and I saw my father sitting on the bima, and he had his hand like this. I can picture it right now. And I could tell he was praying with such kavanah during the sun. Something was so deep. And in Rosh Hashanah lunch afterwards, and only the way a 19-year-old person can have chutzpah, okay? I turned to my dad. I said, Dad, I saw you were like, what were you doing there during the silent meditation? Like something going on. This is the cantor, okay, right? It's probably praying, Eric, okay? But so what are you doing, Dad? I said, Er, you want to really know? I said, yeah. Like, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going through some health challenges right now. And the health challenge required me to change my diet, exercise, and lose weight. And I'm finding it really, really difficult to do. I'm trying. I seem to be hitting a plateau. The doctor's warning me it's got real consequences. It's dangerous for me. I said, so yeah, get on the treadmill, Dad. Come on. He said, I'm telling you, I can't do this alone. I've reached rock bottom. I prayed that a power beyond me will help me to do what the doctor is asking me to do. I can't do it alone. And I looked at him at this moment, my father, probably the strongest person I knew at that time. At 14, I thought he was an idiot. But at 19, at 19, you're just starting to think, as Mark Twain, you got smart pretty quick. You want to know why I'm a rabbi here right now? I can put a direct line. In that moment, I thought to myself, because I thought, God's a crutch. I think I really said that to him. Dad, don't take a crutch. He said, it's no crutch. You get a little older, see what happens. Boom, rabbinical school, okay? Now, I'm not here to convince anyone about God. I'm about to bring in Harold Kushner. But amidst all this mishigas, Christianity has a message. The Holocaust is hanging over our shoulder. We can't seem to say anything about God at all. And then this idea that God's a crutch. Between all those things, we Jews have mishigas. We struggle with God. It makes sense. The message of the Torah doesn't seem to face reality of our lives. The righteous do suffer. And the people who are evil, sadly, sometimes run internet companies, okay? It happens. It happens. Okay? So how are we going to work this out? Now, what I say to my converts often is, say, Rabbi, come by God. Thank God, a lot of our Jews by choice, they're fired up about God. They teach me. But when they come to me and they say, Rabbi, I don't know if I can convert because, some days I believe, sometimes I struggle, I have doubts, I don't know. I say, Jewish. It says in the Torah, okay? Jacob wrestles with an angel and becomes the name of Yisrael. Yisrael literally means one who struggles or wrestles with God. Arthur Waskow, a great teacher and rabbi, wrote a book called We Are the God Wrestlers. That's who we are. So you say, Yisrael, what's the state of Israel? People who wrestle with God. Not who believe in God, but who struggle with it. That's us, Jew. That's a Jew, okay? So if you're struggling, you're not sure, if you don't like Harold Kushner, say, Jewish. You can still be Jewish and not even believe we know that's true, right? You can come to shul. People say, I come to shul. Goldberg comes to shul to talk to God. I come to shul to talk to Goldberg. We know the old joke, all right? Right? You're still Jewish if you don't believe at all. I'm not trying. There's no proselytizing here, okay? But amidst all this struggle, walks in Harold Kushner. So Harold Kushner's story, it touches my heart because I relate to it, man. He says he grew up in the New York area, Brooklyn, whatever. First pulpit, he's like a good Jewish boy, goes to seminary, JTS, New York, gets a job at Great Neck, Long Island, does Great Neck as assistant rabbi, and he tells in the book, he would sit with his congregants as a young rabbi, and they would have tragedy happen, losses, people would die, or illness, and he would say to him very pat things like, they're in a better place now, or they'll be reunited, or all that stuff he'd say, because he's a young rabbi, didn't know what he's doing, okay? And then he got a pulpit job in Natick, Mass., which is outside of Boston, some of you know, right? And he's in Boston, and he settles down, and now he starts to have a family. And he and his wife are blessed with a daughter, and soon after, a son. And the son, Aaron, may he rest in peace, was born with progeria, which is premature aging disease. And when the doctor came to explain what's going to happen with their son Aaron, he and his wife were, devastated isn't a word. They were beyond devastated. The doctor said, you are going to watch your son over the course of 13 to 14 years die slowly, painfully, over weeks and months of years. And around the time of possibly, as he would say, his bar mitzvah, which ended up happening, he died. And Harold Kushner had a crisis of faith. He says in his book, I was a good man. My wife was a good woman. We've lived righteous lives. We make mistakes, sure, but we did nothing majorly sinful. We just wanted to have a family. I'm a rabbi, for God's sake. I devote my whole life to serving other people. And this happens to me. Word Deuteronomy is not working for me. It doesn't work. In fact, he said if that's the kind of God that he hadn't really thought a lot about and exists, then not only does he have a personal problem, he has a professional problem. Because he'd have to leave the rabbinate. But he loved being a rabbi. What's he going to do? And in his famous book, and that's what he wrote, When Bad Things Happen. I mean, it's amazing. Written 40-something years ago, but it reads like today. It's not dated, so I really encourage you to read it if you haven't read it before. Read after Yom Kippur. It's unbelievable. Because what he says is, I had to give up in all those things that I heard in that church. God is in control. Everything happens. There's reasons. God needed him early. God is someone testing my faith, just testing my faith. What kind of God gives you a child to watch die over years? I don't need to be tested by God like that. That's a sick God, he said. Of course, I agree. He then came around, and I want you to read the book, so I'm not going to tell all of it, but I'll give you like kind of the crux of the book. As he looks at Psalm 121, which we actually chant often at funerals and at unveilings. It's a very powerful psalm. I look up to the mountains from where my help comes. Ezri, as it says in Hebrew. Me'ayin yavo Ezri. Where my help come? My help comes from Adonai. And what he said from that is, it's not that when I'm struggling, God solves my problem or God causes the problem. God helps me with my problem. Help doesn't mean fix. Just like a good friend can't fix, or good parenting can't fix all problems with their children, but they can stand by your side, they can hold you, they can love you, they can say, I'll never let you be alone, and they can possibly give you more strength than you ever thought you had on your own. That God is not some external supernatural power out there. God is a power in here that we can hold and feel. It doesn't mean that God's going to take away the cancer. It doesn't mean that God is going to bring the child back to life. Although, who wouldn't wish for that to be true? Who wouldn't? Okay? But God is the source that lets you face, helps you face whatever happens in life. That helps you get up the next day after the funeral, after the Shiva. Some people will say there's no way I could get up and live after the loss I had. And Harold Kushner would say, that's true. Maybe all you got is God's quote-unquote help, sometimes channeled through people and community and love. That's not a God that determined from the beginning, this is how it's going to be. It's a God that gives you strength that you never knew you had before. Because unlike the Marlboro Man, Judaism believes that it's not all about us, that our individual self can't achieve everything, that more is accomplished together in community with people, and from that there is a power even greater than all of us that can give us strength to try to achieve great things. Chevra, in this year to come, I pray for all of us here, people who have had so much suffering and loss in the past year, and sadly we know life is filled with loss and suffering. For all of us, it's coming. I invite you, what is your sense of what God might be? If you find Harold Kushner's that I've given you like a little tipa, a little taste of is inspiring or touching for you, then go out, read his book. Read other of his books. He writes powerfully. when life gives you the ultimate disappointment, he says, don't say it's God's fault. Ask God to help you withstand and confront. May we all have that sense of God's strength, if it works for you, in the year to come. Gamar, Chatima Tova, wishing all, please God, a good sealing in the book of life.